You mentioned DHT. That's kind of all the rage now. Like T itself, testosterone has had its moment for a while. DHT seems to be like really rising with the tides right now. Everybody's DHT maxing. What's the synergy between these two? What is DHT and how can you maximize it? Oh, let's even start earlier than that. Why would you want to maximize DHT?
Yeah, so DHT, dihydrotestosterone, it's just the downstream metabolite of testosterone. So if you have a properly functioning 5-alpha reductase enzyme, that's going to take the testosterone that you have and convert it into dihydrotestosterone. A lot of people are like, why would I want less testosterone? Well, DHT is 5 times more receptive and
Hmm.
5 times more likely to bind to the androgen receptor than testosterone is. So for every single testosterone molecule that binds to the androgen receptor, you have like 5x the potency when you bind a dihydrotestosterone molecule to that.
Hmm.
So we want DHT because a lot of the high T traits that we think of are actually like high DHT traits, right? The deeper voice, the body hair, the cool, calm confidence, the spatial awareness, like the mental fortitude that comes with being like a high T individual, that's actually DHT. Testosterone aromatizes, right? The aromatase enzyme converts testosterone into estrogen, right? So if you're increasing your testosterone, some of that is going to be converted into estrogen. DHT
Hmm.
inhibits the aromatase enzyme. So not only can that DHT not convert itself into estrogen, it's going to inhibit your other testosterone from being converted into estrogen. So DHT is really what people want to be focusing on, and it's hard because one, there's this like national campaign to lower DHT because we think it destroys your hairline, right? Lowering your
Right. That's the
DHT to save your
creatine
hairline is
thing,
like
right? Like I was going to say that's the creatine link. Like creatine increases DHT. That's why people think creatine can cause you to have hair loss, basically.
that's what was in the study. Like the
Right.
singular study with like 30 rugby players, it wasn't even a hair loss correlation, it was a DHT correlation. So to me, I'm like,
Hmm.
yeah, that's good. But creatine does cause shedding. It causes a different type of shedding than androgenic alopecia. And we think that comes down to like a dopaminergic component to it, right? Because
Ah,
we know that like brain derived neurotrophic factor, that can lead to hair shedding as well. And that comes to there's some speculation, but essentially the way that certain amino acids are metabolized and then deposit in your scalp and potentially cause scalp calcification or suffocate the hair
hmm.
follicles. But it's oftentimes reversible, right? So I'm coming in as someone who like my DHT was fucking destroyed because of Accutane, because of SSRIs. So I had to work my way up, and the changes that I've had have been substantial, and I allocate a lot of those changes to prioritizing DHT because I was in the typical like normie health meme where it's like eat a lot of kale, like drink your green tea, right? Have the X, Y, and Z. Little did I know that so many of these longevity compounds are antagonistic to that 5-alpha reductase enzyme. They actually lower your DHT.
Interesting.
And we see this because if you look at any longevity guru, any especially like the like holistic health guys that are into longevity, they look like they have low DHT, right? They have no
Right.
vitality whatsoever. They don't sound confident. They don't look, like a man in any capacity because so many of the things they're doing are directly inhibiting this crucial hormone.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's why I love DHT. I think that it should be a guy's primary purpose to not degrade that enzyme, the 5-alpha
Yeah.
reductase enzyme, and do things to actually enhance that enzyme.
What are some of the practical things? Either go with this where you will. It might be behaviorally, things like training principles or competition, or again, the spark plug analogy which you used, or foods. Is there anything that you kind of look at as really big rocks here?
Yeah, so I think first of all, having like those steroidogenic enzyme precursors, the things that help with that positive hormone cascade, a lot of that comes down to cholesterol. It comes down to micronutrients. It comes down to these trace minerals like boron and adequate levels of selenium. It comes down to specific supplementation and specific tools. They're like, okay, cool, these are good for DHT, so I'm going to prioritize these. Right?
Right.
I think oysters are highly androgenic, and you
Heck
notice
yeah.
that when you have a bunch of oysters, and you're like, whoa, I feel it. But I think also importantly, looking at things that may inhibit DHT and just being a little bit more conscientious with those. I think we're all memed into having, functional mushrooms because functional mushrooms
Mm,
they do have a lot of health properties, but almost all functional mushrooms are anti-androgenic. It's in it's in the mechanism itself. I think that there's some where like you can get too deep in that rabbit hole because a lot of compounds express like anti-androgenic activity in vitro or in vivo or like in the petri dish. Um, but that doesn't really correlate to what happens at a systemic level. I think the primary component, though, really is avoiding the common things that we just know are bad for you, right? Like inhibiting your sleep by like inhibiting melatonin production with blue light, right? Putting your balls in polyester, probably not the best idea. Exposing yourself to copious amounts of microplastics, which then lodge into mitochondria rich tissues like your brain and like your
Yeah.
testicles, which are the primary drivers of these hormones. But a lot of it, like I said, you can easily get neurotic. We talked about this before the call. You can easily get neurotic when focusing on those things. But if you just focus on the lifestyle behind it and the foundations of who you are and how you act, that is going to be able to essentially Chad ram your way through some of these biological infractions. And I realized that because when I was a health nut, when I was a health weirdo, because I had no other option, because I was, my life was effectively over. I was so neurotic about these things, but I wasn't getting the results. I was actually getting
Right.
reverse results. I was becoming more effeminate and more emasculated. It wasn't until I said, fuck it, and I started living a more rugged lifestyle. All of the things that I was searching for when I was hardcore biohacking just came up naturally while I was smoking tobacco, while I was drinking beer, while I was just living a really cool lifestyle. So, yeah, there's a certain point where you can't out biological the psychological, right? You can't out
Hmm.
physical the mental and you can't out mental the physical. You have to approach both in tactical ways without letting either one become overbearing.
Yeah. Dude, you're speaking my language. I was talking about this just yesterday. It's like, yeah, people running around over optimized to death, like worrying about all the things, the microplastics, you can't touch receipts, you've got to wear all organic cotton, like these things, binary things on their own, like really solid behaviors to lean into. But it becomes this really deep rabbit hole of a milieu of poisons or toxins that are robbing you of vitality to the point where trying to over control them or optimize them actually makes you more fragile. And I think like something that I've understood about like kind of testosterone DHT is one of the essences of that as a kind of physical and mental manifestation is basically, yeah, not giving so much of a fuck, the anti-fragile lifestyle. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.